This is the complete guide to fame farming in Albion Online. I'm going to teach you how to level up fast. If you're a new player, experienced player, veteran player, card swiper, whale, it does not matter. I'm going to fully educate you on this game's methods of fame farming. What's the best, what's the worst, what to avoid. Let's get into it. So here on the screen, I have a different representation of each safe zone. Now, I know this is orange, but we're going to pretend it's yellow because it's easier to see. Alright, so we have tiers 2, 3, and 4 in the blue zone, tiers 5, and technically 6 and 7, more on this later, in the yellow zone, 5, 6, and 7 in the red zone, and then tiers 5 through 8 in the black zone. So, if you were to kill a mob in a tier 5 yellow zone, you will not get as much fame as if you kill one in a red zone, because the red zone has more risk, therefore it gives you slightly more fame. And of course, if you kill a mob in a tier 5 black zone, you get even more fame than from the red zone or the yellow zone. That is how this works, but there's a few hidden ways to earn fame that aren't exactly, so linear. For instance, in blue and yellow zones, you can earn faction points, which means you can earn and cash in those faction points for rewards, one of those being a chest that gives you fame tomes. You can also do this in the red zone, but it's a little more risky, so technically these three zones can earn faction points. Now, the black zone has its own thing with favor and might. It's not as efficient for farming fame in those regards, but the mobs still give the most fame per kill, but also the mobs are stronger. So if you take an open world mob in a tier 5 yellow zone, they will hit you much weaker than a tier 5 mob in the black zone. Their health also will be much lower in the tier 5 zone in the yellow zone. Their armor will be lower, and so on and so forth. Also, another thing to note in the yellow zones, because these are way more populated than the red and black zones, this means that you are more likely to find rarer enemies more often in these zones, though mob density is about the same regardless. Now I have listed several different activities that can be considered fame farming, and I kept things out that aren't really fame farming, such as hunting monsters through tracking. That's not really a fame farm activity, so I didn't list it here. I didn't list every activity in the game, just the ones known for fame farming. Now the three down here, the hardcore expeditions, the Avalonian raids, and the other raids, I am a solo player, and I do not have access to an entire guild of people, so I do not know the numbers of this, though I assume it would be higher because it's a group activity. I don't know for sure, though. And so we're going to do a little tier list real quick and essentially show you the best fame farms, and we're going to talk about all of these in coherence with all of these so that you can get the best idea of how fame farming works. But before we do that, I want to talk about multipliers. Just a sec. So here are the multipliers. I might have forgotten some or not had access to some, but they're pretty simple stuff. So the ones on the top here all add up. So if you have premium, if you have the satchel, if you have the fame week going, if you're faction flagged, if you have an average buff, they can all add up. Whereas this one below the line is then a multiplier towards that top line. So 2 to 8 times the multiplier you're getting from this can be focused into a singular node through the usage of combat fame credits, and depending on if you're specking up a weapon, specialization, an armor, or a helmet, the values are different, whereas it's 2x for weapons, 4x for armors, 8x for helmets and boots, and it's like 50x towards offhands, but we don't really care about that because it's small of a number to really care about. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go and dissect each of these activities and see what is the most optimal and best and fastest way to fame farm when comparing it to save zones and full loot zones. So let's start with some crummy ones. Solo dungeons. Here's the reason why solo dungeons are F tier. I'm going to go ahead and tell you exactly why. Anything you do in a solo dungeon, be it a tier 4 blue dungeon, a tier 5 yellow zone dungeon, or even a tier 8 black zone dungeon, you will get 6 times more fame by doing open world mobs. The only reason people do solo dungeons is because they are extremely bored or they want some treasure, and the treasure is a gamble. So now that you know why solo dungeons are an F tier when compared to open world mobs, let's talk about if you still want to do them anyway and the most efficient way to do them. So when you go to a full loot zone, you can't just go walk around with 8.4 gear. What is 8.4 gear? For those that don't know, it would look something, you know, like these items right here. This is a tier 8 crossbow, and this is a 0.4 enchantment level. Well, this crossbow's worth 20 million silver, okay? You're not going to a black zone in that kind of Gucci loot, because if you kitted out your full character in that, you are marked for death. You will be hunted down by people who will rally in a Discord to kill you. What's more acceptable is to kind of go in a set, you know, something more along like this. This is like a 4.3 Bear Paw set, you know, it's worth 268k. Something a little more safer, a little more responsible with your money, I suppose. And I guess I just don't have a helmet to... Oh, wait, there it is. So, like, this whole set is only 400,000 silver, and it can do the tier 8 dungeons just fine, though not nearly as fast, of course, as a full 8.4 set. So what this means is that in a budget or even in an expensive set, like I can take a set designed specifically for speedrunning dungeons, go to a tier 8 dungeon, and it will take me about 15 minutes to clear a tier 8 dungeon. Or I can take a full 8.4 set and go into these zones because there is zero risk in losing it. And so in 15 minutes time, if I were to run tier 5 yellow zone dungeons, I can run 7 to 8 of those by the time I finish one tier 8 dungeon. So, which do you think is worth more fame? 7 tier 5 yellow zone dungeons or 1 tier 8 black zone dungeon? The answer is the tier 5s. 7 of these will always be more fame, and on average, on consistency, without jackpots, will always be more silver. However, the tier 8 dungeon has one thing going for it, and that is that you have a higher capacity for jackpots. So what does that mean? Well, the best item you can possibly get in a tier 5 solo dungeon is a tier 7.4 weapon, whereas the best weapon you can get in a tier 8 black zone dungeon is a tier 8.4 weapon. So you could potentially find one of these weapons that's worth 30 million silver in a black zone dungeon, and you're not going to find stuff nearly worth as much in those yellow zone dungeons. But you have to be lucky to get that anyway, and it's almost rarely ever going to happen. And so, if you must run solo dungeons for fame, tier 5 yellow zone is the clear winner. And there's another reason too. Once you are a wealthy character, there's several multipliers that you can apply. For instance, you got premium, you got the satchel. You're not going to wear an 8.4 satchel worth 108% increase in fame in a tier 8 black zone. You'll be hunted down and killed for it. Also, you cannot faction flag in black zones. So this multiplier is out. The Averade buff, you know, is generally designed for groups and guild players, so you won't be getting this one, but you will be getting this one. So there you go. And that's for the multipliers. And then, of course, you know, having silver, you can have auto respec on, but you can have this on regardless. It's not an item. It's simply a toggle in your Destiny board. So I push B, and you can turn auto respec on or off using this button. That's all that is. So again, black zones can utilize that. So let's go to the next one now. So let's go for a good one. Let's talk about open world mobs. Open world mobs are great for fame. They're way better than solo dungeons. I'm putting them in A tier, but let's talk about farming open world mobs. All right, and we're going to do a similar thing. So if you kill an open world mob in a tier 5 yellow zone, you do not get as much fame as if you do it in a red or a black zone. And if you do it in a tier 8 zone, you will get even more fame. Now, I just want to mention that in a tier 8 zone, you're not wearing those 8.4 delicious Gucci gears. You're using a budget set. But open world mobs, they're easy. They're not solo dungeon bosses. They're not grouped up as much as solo dungeons are. And they give way more fame, right? So you can take a budget set out and you can farm the tier 8 black zones. Yes, that's absolutely fine. You'll get plenty of fame doing that, about 2.5 million per hour. Which is decent, okay? You're not going to make 2.5 million doing any kind of solo dungeon with any kind of build, but you can make up to 2.5 million fame per hour in a tier 8 black zone with a budget set. That's absolutely fine. You can also make the same amount of fame, again, in a tier 5 yellow zone with 8.4. And you can make over 3 to 4 million, I think, when I last did the calculations, with the satchel, and with the faction buff, and of course with premium. You gotta have that premium. Fame Week, I didn't do it with Fame Week. But the reason why is that tier 8 Black Zone open world mobs, they're not the most dangerous mobs out there, but they are dangerous. They're tanky, they'll knock you around, they will delete your health bar if you're not careful. You do have to play carefully, and there's always a threat of being ganked. The travel time it takes to get out to a tier 8 Black Zone is about 15 minutes. Whereas in a tier 5 Yellow Zone, you can be there in like 2 minutes. Into a deeper one, that is. 3 zones away from town. But you can also instantly clear tier 5 mob camps in one attack with certain builds. Whereas you cannot do that in tier 8 zones. You simply can't do it. And so, what this means is that this zone is way easier to fame farm open world mobs in. Also, out of all of these activities, for brand new players who don't have specialization or gear to, fame farm quickly, the open world mobs is where they should start and where they should stay for a very long time. This is where I recommend new players fame farm, or I'm sorry, that's the style of fame farming, and I recommend they stay in the yellow zones so they aren't losing money. Alright, that is just how it is. Now, of course, with the budget set in a tier 8 Black Zone, you will fame farm faster than with the budget set in a tier 5 Yellow Zone. That is absolutely true. And not everyone wants to buy an 8.3 set, though I believe they to be cheap enough. For instance, this, well, I don't have it anymore, but an 8.3 Spiked Gauntlet instantly clears an open world mob camp and costs maybe about 4 million silver, right? I don't have one to show because I upgraded to 8.4, just because I'm that kind of player. But, that's just how it is. So let's talk about the next one. So, corrupted dungeons are not really the greatest fame farm unless you're doing Slayer corrupted dungeons and you have the PvP infamy like in the top 2% or something to get those bonus boosts. I'm putting it in D tier because most players won't be able to do these and get efficient fame. Here's the thing. When you do a corrupted dungeon, you could do Hunter corrupted dungeon, which is technically tier 5 Yellow Zone. Or you can do Stalker, which is technically tier 6 Black Zone. Or you can do Slayer, which is, I think it's tier 7 or tier 8 Black Zone. These cap your item power, and what that means is that if you do a Hunter corrupted dungeon, which is equivalent to tier 5, if you wear the strongest gear possible, it's leveled down to be equal to 4.1 or 4.2 gear. Same thing with doing the Stalker corrupted dungeons, which is the tier 6 Black Zone here. It levels your gear down, I believe, to be equal to 4.2, 4.3. I forget. Only in Slayer corrupted dungeons is there no item power cap, although I think they might have capped it a little bit. So your power is still slightly limited, and your fame farming is, drastically cut from that. So multipliers in the corrupted dungeons, you can wear a satchel if you want. Fame Week works, premium works. You can't be faction flagged. And yeah, so you just can't be faction flagged when doing corrupted dungeons because factions don't exist in the corrupted dungeons. Corrupted dungeons used to be really good treasure, not so much anymore. There's really no point to run these for fame. It's more so for the thrill of 1v1 PvP, and it's just a meta rock, paper, scissors, circle jerk. It's not fun. I don't think it's fun. It's not really profitable either. So let's talk about group dungeons, and I should have put a little disclaimer on the group dungeons, and I should have put solo. Same thing with the static dungeons, as in you are now powerful enough to solo these because you spent your first 3 days saving up your money and fame farming in the open world. And so let's talk about group dungeons here. I'm putting group dungeons also in the A tier because once you graduate from open world mobs, you can now solo group dungeons with specific builds. There is a variety of builds. You're not limited to one build like this Avalonian Road Chest Boss build. More on that later. But when doing group dungeons, you are limited in your capacity to solo them. So you can obviously solo most tier 4 group dungeons. A legendary tier 4 group dungeon can be very difficult. Tier 5 Yellow Zone group dungeons, yes, you can solo them. I would say up to 5.2. 5.3 is very difficult, and a legendary Tier 5 group dungeon is you should avoid it. It's not efficient to do. It's too damn hard. Your character will have their gear broken. You can also go into the red zone and solo group dungeons if you want, in red and black zone as well. It's very unadvised, though. It's very risky, and you will absolutely risk death doing it. I don't recommend it. So, for the sake of the tier list, we're sticking to these two zones right here. Tier 4, I only enter them if they are 0.3 or higher. That means purple butterflies. If they don't have at least purple butterflies, I don't go into them. For Tier 5, at least blue butterflies. That's it. I don't buy the maps. The market is ruined on the maps. Don't even bother. Someone is controlling them all, or they bought them all for themselves. I don't bother. And if you think you can enter a group dungeon and it closes behind you, think again when doing the red or black zones. They don't close for like 45 minutes. And ain't no one got time for sitting there just for a tiny boost in fame. It isn't worth it. All right. And the cool thing is that when doing group dungeons solo, you can do, because they're in save zones, you can take advantage of that 108% satchel. You can take advantage of the 15% while faction flagged. And it's just really nice, because you're also earning faction points, which you can turn in for the chest. I'll show you, here, I just have some of the faction point tome rewards. Check these out. I've got 39 of these, and they give 200,000 fame each. I can just burn through these like crazy. And, this is only like a week's worth of tomes from playing a few hours a day. It's really, really easy and quick to acquire these tomes of insight from doing faction-flagged activities. Alright, we keep picking a bad one and a good one. Let's pick a bad one. Avalonian Road Chest Bosses. Alright, so here's the thing with this. A lot of people that do this activity, they claim it's S tier. They're like, oh, it's the best thing ever. If you're not doing this, you're not fame farming right. And here's the thing. They're using a cheat program called Portaler, and they're having friends and guilds scout for them so that they know where the chest bosses are before they stream or before they record a video, and yada yada yada. If you were to actually roam around as an honest person without third-party programs, it will take you an average of like 40 minutes to find a chest road boss to fight. Only like 2 specific builds, one which is kind of expensive, the other one is pretty cheap, are required to do these chest bosses. They were recently nerfed. The loot isn't even that good anymore. A lot of people complained. And it's a highly dangerous activity because it is considered a black zone activity, tiers 5 through 8. Also, some bosses you simply can't solo. There's certain tier 8 ones that you just can't do, even with good gear. While you're doing this boss, gankers can run up and just end your life and finish off the boss and take all the credit. And again, it's very unreliable. I put it in F tier because it's unreliable. It's difficult to do for new players. It's very build specific. It's not even that good when compared to some of the other farms I'll talk about here in just a bit. And yeah, if you have all those third-party hacked programs and you have scouts and scout accounts and a hideout in the mist, sure, you bump it up to A tier. Yeah, it's still not the best, even when you cheat. So I'm putting F tier, guys. All right. Let's go ahead and reveal the S tier. Let's talk about the S tier. You've watched enough of the video. Let's go. It's the static solo dungeons. But which one, how, and why? Why are static dungeons the best fame farm in the game? Well, it's pretty simple, okay? So, static dungeons give more fame than both open world mobs and group dungeons. A static dungeon is meant for groups of players, but they can be soloed. They absolutely can be soloed. So, my recommendation, and I'll tell you why, is the tier 4 static solo dungeons. And you may be wondering, what is a static dungeon? I don't know what these words mean. What the hell? What are you talking about? This is a video for new players, and let me show you. On the world map, you have these dungeons that just perpetually exist. That's what a static dungeon is. If you go down here to Sandgust Cleft, there will always be this dungeon here all the time forever. It cannot be deleted, moved, or destroyed by players. It always exists, and there will always be a horde of undead in and around this dungeon. If you go to a tier 5 zone, you have, Snapshaft Trough. And here's another static dungeon. This is the Deepwood Enclave, or whatever. I don't know how to pronounce that word. But there you go, and this is another static dungeon. They're all over the place. They're all over, and even Tier 3 zones have a static dungeon. This Fractured Ground, this is a static dungeon. It's a Tier 3 zone, though. They're not that good. And here's why I recommend the Tier 4 zone. The mob density is so much higher than the Tier 5 yellow zone mob density. Yes, if you kill one mob in a Tier 5 static yellow zone, it's worth way more fame than a Tier 4. However, you can pull like twice to 3 times as many mobs at a time in a Tier 4 than you can in the Tier 5. The Tier 5 ones get pretty dangerous until you get very high level 8.4 gear, or even Awakened gear. And, of course, the statics do exist in the red and black zones. Of course they do. However, gank groups come here to these zones to clear their reputation after they gank a bunch of people. So these are always filled with gankers. Bad. You don't want to farm there. These are controlled by guilds, but also something even worse than guilds. These are farmed by very specific invisible meta players who sneak into these areas and slay the boss for the treasure. They have multiple invisibilities and multiple ways to knock you into mobs and kill you and take your loot. So these are to be avoided. Now, the Tier 8 statics are completely controlled by guilds. You won't ever be able to farm these as a solo player. So that's why these zones are pretty much off limits. And again, because these are a Tier 4 and Tier 5 zones, you can use your full 8.4 gear with 0 risk. You can also use your satchel at 108%. You can use your faction flagged buff. And again, if you want to know, like these, the A tier farms are anywhere from 2 to 3 million fame per hour. The static solo dungeons in a Tier 4 blue zone, when combined with the satchel, when combined with auto respec, and all, you know, premium, etc., is over 20 million fame per hour. And I have multiple videos on my channel that prove this and show the math and show the data. So what is this a difference of? So what this means is that if it takes me 2 hours in a static dungeon as a solo player to level up a weapon specialization to 100, let me just show you what that is. So if I take this Trinity Spear, it's level 1 specialization. I can use combat fame credits and pump this sucker up to level 100. It's going to cost me around 17 million combat fame credits. Well, in 2 hours time, farming a Tier 4 Blue Zone static with satchel with my 8.4 set, I can earn this amount of combat fame credits in just 2 hours. Well, it's going to take me 20 hours to earn the same amount in the A tier here. That's how huge of a difference the S and the A tier is. The S tier is way up here, okay, compared to the A tier. I want you to understand this. And it's a save zone activity, so you're earning those faction points, you're earning those fame tomes, which aren't even calculated into the 20 million per hour, mind you. So it's even more than what I'm stating. Alright, so let's talk about the mists now. The mists are where these two come in, this Tier 6 and Tier 7 yellow zone, right? Tier 6 and Tier 7 yellow zones don't exist in the world map. There is no such thing as a Tier 6 yellow zone. There is in the mists, and that is the rarity of the mist itself. So, when mists are rare, or when they're blue or purple, they have a chance to become Tier 6 or Tier 7. And this changes things a little bit, but not by much. You can also be in a Tier 5 yellow zone mist, and then suddenly find a Tier 7 yellow zone abbey. Or Tier 6, of course. But you won't find Tier 8. You have to go to the red or black zone to find Tier 8, abbeys. Or mists, rather. So, let's talk about them. Let's talk about just mist mobs. Random mist mobs on the map. Alright? These guys, you know, they're C tier. It's a C tier activity. It's better than Corrupted Dungeons. They're not better than open world mobs. They are nerfed compared to open world mobs. They are about the same difficulty to kill. So you shouldn't just go to mist only to farm mobs. That's bad. You shouldn't do that. Mist camps, well, you have to kill the mist mobs to get the mist camps credit. They're also C tier. they're also C tier. They're better than corrupted dungeons. They're better than solo dungeons, and in my opinion, better than Avalonian road chests when being legit. They're still kind of dangerous though. It's not a bad activity, right? If you're a brand new player and you hate doing open world mobs, go ahead and do some mist camps. It's not bad, all right? If you get bored, you can get some money doing them sometimes. If you have premium active, without premium, the money kind of sucks. Then you have the Mist Abbeys, and these are pretty good. I would put them in B tier. They are not as good as open world mobs, unless you're in a tier 8 one, okay? When you're in a tier, here's the thing, okay? When you are in a tier 8 Mist Abbey, it's actually more fame than the open world mobs, okay? I know it's weird. Well, technically it is compared to their power level, because enemies in the Mist Abbeys are weaker than open world mobs. They're also more mob dense. There are more of them packed together than in the open world. So technically, these two, the A and the B tier, they flip-flop. They switch places when tier 8 is considered. Otherwise, it's B tier. It's an alright activity for fame farming. There's very specific builds that can clear Mist Abbeys very quickly. It's okay for treasure, but this is all about the fame farm. The problem and the reason what keeps these from being in the A tier is simple. You can't be faction flagged while you do them. That sucks. However, doing mist camps can give you more might and favor, but that still does not compare to the faction flagged buffs. That does not compare to the faction rewards. That's why they're in a lower tier. Also, you're not wearing the 108% satchel. You can maybe wear something in between 40 and 108%, you know, when doing abbeys. They're much safer, okay? Like, as far as safety goes, this is not a safety tier list. They're way more safe because it's solo players. You're not getting killed by guilds and clans and stuff. That's just how it is. So let's sum up the activities now. We have the S tier, static solo dungeons. Which tier should you do? Tiers 4, blue zone, and tier 5, yellow zone. Ding, ding, ding. Alright, now we have the A tier, open world mobs. Which one should you do? If you are a brand new player, I recommend that you do the tier 5 yellow zone while faction flagged when you can. And I also recommend doing tier 7 and tier 8 in black zone if you want to spice it up a bit. If you're also a budget player and you don't quite have the 8.3 to do the tier 5. So there you go. Next up is open world. Oh, we just did open world mobs. Next up is the group dungeons while soloing them. So this one's pretty simple. It's also an A tier activity. This is going to get all over the place, guys. So don't mind me. But I recommend, again, tier 4, tier 5 for group dungeon solo. And I would say, let's get our paintbrush out here. Make that a 0.3 and then 0.2. So 5.2 and 4.3, respectively. Now, Mist Abbeys. I would don't waste your time doing these in the blue and the yellow zone, okay? I would say if a tier 7 yellow zone pops up, get in there, why not? Tier 7 and tier 8 for black zone, get in there, do those. Don't bother with anything below that. Mist mobs, just don't. Just don't do them. I'm gonna get the red. Just don't bother. Okay? They're still better, though. Okay, so you have mist camps. Mist camps, if you're a brand new player, okay, that's fine. You're going to be stuck in the tier 5s, doing the mist camps, and I expanded that a little bit. Now, when you go in the black zone, you're just going to get murdered. You're 100% going to die. So I really can't recommend any of these, though. They're all right to do. They're okay to do. Sorry, Miss Abby, we're going to cover you up because it's MS Paint. That's just how it is. Corrupted dungeons, I'm just going to tell you, just don't. For fame farming, just don't do them. Solo dungeons, just don't do them. Again, just absolutely not, okay? And then Avalonian Road chest bosses. Okay, obviously, any of the tiers are fine. Oh, I guess I just kind of hijacked these here. It's a copy pasting, my bad. So that do whatever it is you want to do with these. Let's get like a weird color like purple, and then just put like a question. That's not my paintbrush. Get like a little question mark. Yes, you can solo the tier 8. Some of the chest bosses, not all of them though. And it's an explosion of fame. It is. It absolutely is. If you can find one, if you can do it and not die doing it. But you're not going to get the faction flag buff. You're not going to probably be wearing a good satchel. You probably will have an Ava raid buff if you're doing Rhodes content. Probably. You'll probably have that one. Chances are you're not going to have Fame Week active because then everyone's hunting those down. And you probably can afford premium, but that's about it, right? I don't know. Anyway, that is the video, guys. That is the absolute video. If you have any questions about fame farming, or if you think you know something I didn't cover in the video, please let us know in the comments, all right? And also, a lot of people are going to downvote this video because it's called elitism and snobbery. And what happens is you're going to see the Black Zone players watch this video, and they're going to be like, oh, this is wrong. This is completely wrong. Who the hell does static dungeons? And, well, they obviously don't because they're a slave to a Black Zone guild, so they're only doing, like, open world mobs in the tier 7 and 8 zones and stuff like that, right? Or they're purely a mist player because they think that the only reason to play this is for the PvP. Pro tip, the PvP in this game kind of sucks. So I need your help thumbing the video up. I need you to click that thumbs up button right now because those guys absolutely hate my opinions on fame farming. I have videos that back up the numbers, okay? The numbers do not lie, right? And then compounding the multipliers and the satchels and the fact that you can go to safe zones with extremely overpowered gear. And I know there's the argument, but new players won't have 8.3. Of course not. They should play the game for 3 days, and then they can easily afford 8.3. I got 8.3 gear on the very first day of the East server opening in 1.5 days. So as soon as that server opened, I played for 1.5 days, and I had full 8.3. Like, and that's a new server where everything is hyper expensive. So you could technically do it even faster on the West server, or on an established server, even on East now, you could totally do it faster. But the point is that a new player, if they just play the game for 3 days, they can afford it. So that is a non-argument, right? And I even gave them the options in this video. Oh, if you're a new player and you just started out and you have a budget set and you don't have any money yet, do this. I explained it clearly in the video. But I need your help because they're going to thumbs it down. So please like the video. It really helps. And finally, the last thing I need you to do is on the right side of your screen is a video you should absolutely click. And if you don't click it, you're not going to get any good Christmas presents. And if you're watching this after Christmas, then you're not going to have a good Valentine's Day or whatever holiday you celebrate. The next holiday that you're looking forward to is going to be a bad one. And if you're not looking forward to any holidays, then hey, man, come here, dude. Just come here, man. Just hug it out, bro.